His name was Josiah, but that name didn't rightly belong to him, no more than a brand on a mule belongs to the mule. It was give to him on a cotton plantation nigh Savannah, where he growed up under nothing but the same sky cut up by the lash and the overseer's holler. His mammy had whispered to him once when he was a little scrap of a boy, that his true name had been something else, some African word maybe, but that name died with her in a fever-sick summer when the work never let up and the graves got dug faster and the cotton could be picked. In them days a slave warn't nothing but property, same as a horse or a plow. The law said a master couldn't kill one without some cause, and there was talk of excessive cruelty being in the rules in some states. But laws ain't worth a hooter when the only folks on the jury is white men what owns slaves theirselves. His word warn't took in court agin no white man, so if a master killed his slave, why, 9 times out of 10 nothing come of it. That was just the way of the world in 1815. Josiah was nigh on 25 then, and he'd got a notion in his head that wouldn't shake loose no matter how hard they beat it out of him. He was going to run. Life on that plantation had turned into pure misery, families ripped apart like old rags, sold off down the river, never to be seed again. He didn't have nothing to lose. Runnin' was the only way he could ever call his own life his own. It commenced on a black, moonless night. Word had been slippin' from mouth to ear amongst the quarters, quiet as snakes through the grass. Down south yonder there's a place where folks like us ain't hunted like rabbits, where the Spaniards won't give you back, where the Injuns'll take you in. That place was Florida. Josiah didn't light out by his lonesome. With him was Ruth, a woman about his own age, a 14-year-old boy what didn't have no name they used much, and an old gray-headed man what could read the stars like other folks read a almanac. They slipped off after dark, creepin' through marshes and fields and piney woods, keepin' clear of the big roads. Come mornin', the overseer found them gone and turned loose a pack of slave catchers, mean men with guns and dogs and ropes, all of them itchin' for the bounty. If even one slave got clean away, the rest would start believin' it could be done, and once hope got loose in the quarters the whole system commenced to unravel. Slavery only worked long as the colored folks figured there warn't no door out. Them hunters warn't chasin' just for runaways. They was chasin' the idea of bein' free. Because when folks start to believe they can slip the collar, the whole machine stops tinnin'. The old man said, low and steady, "Boys, we don't run straight. We run like the wind blows." Dogs follow scent carried on the breeze. To run agin the wind would have been pure suicide. So they pushed south, dodgin' patrols, fordin' dirty rivers, slippin' through pine barrens where every snap of a twig could mean death. They come at last to the country nigh the St. Mary's River, right on the edge of Florida, and there the dogs caught up. Guns cracked. The old man dropped without a sound. Ruth lit out into the swamp and warn't never seen again. Josiah and the boy got clear, but only for a spell. By the 3rd day with nothin' in their bellies the boy couldn't stand no more. Josiah was left alone. There warn't no sharp line between Georgia and Florida in them days, no fence, no signboard, just a slow change in the world. Fewer white folks, more water, more quiet. Josiah crossed over without knowin' the very minute he done it, but he felt it in his bones, the law that had been huntin' him didn't reach this far. He struck the country along the Apalachicola River, knee-deep water, twisted cypress, mosquitoes thick as smoke, and a silence so heavy it pressed down on a man's chest. He had nothing. No food, no clean drink, no notion which way to turn. Thirst drove him to swallow stagnant water. After that the world commenced to spin, and he seen things that weren't there. He fell at last on the edge of a still pond, flat on his back in the mud, eyes wide open but seein' nothin', breathin' hard and slow. How long he laid there nobody knows, but they found him. Standin' over him was a dark-skinned man with eyes that didn't move much. He warn't white. He warn't like Josiah. He was a Seminole. Behind him was others, and among them was black men like Josiah, only they warn't slaves. They was free. "You ain't hunted here no more," the Seminole said. They didn't ask his name nor where he come from. They give him water first, then meat. After 2 days one of them, a feller what could talk a little English, told him quiet like, "Here, a man ain't nobody's property." Josiah didn't answer. He couldn't make hisself believe it yet. Where in the world had he fetched up? There was a whole settlement of Seminoles and runaway slaves in them woods, in a strong place folks would come to call Negro Fort later on, a hidden fort, stout and dangerous to anybody fool enough to try and break it. On the 3rd night, after he'd eat and drunk clean water, Josiah woke up sudden. Not from fear. From the quiet. For the first time in all his born days he didn't hear dogs. He didn't hear orders. He didn't hear chains clinking. Only water and wind, and people what looked at him like he was a man. Well, sir, that wind, she up and changed her direction all of a sudden like, without so much as a by your leave. Josiah, he felt her coming long afore any man could open his mouth to holler about it. Down there in the camp alongside the Apalachicola River, the silence warn't no common quiet no more. It was the kind that makes a feller's skin prickle with what's fixin' to happen. One bright mornin', a Seminole scout comes slippin' back into camp. He didn't say a blamed word right off. He just dipped up a gourd of water, drunk it slow, and then he looked the elders square in the eye. After a spell he says, plain and short, "They say comin'." Nothin' else needed sayin'. Everybody knowed mighty well who they was. The army was marchin' south, and not in them little bitty patrols like before, nor for no common punishment neither. This here was war, full-growed and mean. At the head of 'em rode the man whose name folks only whispered, like it might bite, Andrew Jackson. What the white men would call Negro Fort, later on warn't just some old pile of logs and dirt. It was built up out of great earthen mounds, with old cannon squatting on the walls and ramparts of wood and soil. But more than that, it was the pure grit and will of folks that had nowhere left on God's green earth to run to. Josiah, he warn't no more the runaway that had fell splat in the mud 2 summers back. He had learned to handle a flintlock right smart, to slip through the water without scaring a minnow, and to melt clean away amongst the trees like a shadow. But the most precious thing he had learnt was this: here, he warn't fightin' just for his own hide. Here, he was standin' up for the freedom of every last soul that drawed breath in that camp. The first scrape warn't no grand battle like you read about in the papers. It was more of a sudden, ugly little set-to. A handful of soldiers got coaxed into the swamp, and Josiah, he was right there, chest deep in the black water, holdin' his breath till his lungs fair burnt. One soldier come slogging past within 2 steps of him. Them boots sucked and squished in the mud something awful. Then Josiah, he riz up his piece. For a breath he seen the cotton fields again, heard the hounds baying. Then he pulled the trigger. The crack of that flintlock split the woods wide open. After that, everything busted loose. Screams went up everywhere, and fire riz, and men was sloshin' water on it, and cussin' and carryin' on. The Seminoles didn't tarry. They melted back into the green thicket, and the marshes quicker'n a cat can wink. In the months that followed, what had come down on Florida warn't no simple expedition no more. It was a pure disaster. Andrew Jackson warn't huntin' for no palaver nor treaties. Villages went up in smoke, fields was trampled and burnt, and folks was hunted like rabbits. It didn't matter who you was, black, red, or in between. Everything got the torch and the bullet. To them soldiers, one was same as t'other. One evening a messenger come paddlin' up the river. He didn't have far to come. He just says, quiet like, "They done destroyed everything." Them cannons from the boats had hammered the fort till one ball struck the powder magazine. The sky itself tore open with the blast. Josiah warn't there that day, but he seen the smoke risin' black and thick for miles. When they got to where Negro Fort had stood, there warn't nothin' left but scorched ground, splintered timbers, and a heavy smell of death hanging in the air like fog. Josiah stood there stock still. That was the place where he had learnt what it was to be free. There he had learned to be a man, and now it was all gone to ashes. That night an old Seminole spoke up, slow and solemn. "We don't fight for places. We fight so's not to be catched." There warn't no use buildin' forts no more. They lit out deeper into the swamps, where even the army couldn't foller. They headed for the Everglades. Josiah waded through water up to his waist. Behind him was fire and smoke, that was the past. Ahead was darkness, skeeters, and the unknown. But for the first time he warn't runnin'. He walked careful, not disturbin' the alligators nor givin' the soldiers a sign. Only free folks can understand that kind of walkin'. Deep in the swamp one of the Seminoles asked him, "What if they come again?" Josiah looked around at the water and the trees and the shadows, and he says, "Here they won't find us." But the world changed without no drums nor no gunfire, nor no line drawed in the dirt. Way off yonder, in some cold room up north, they signed a paper in the year 1819. White men called it the Adams-Onís Treaty. Florida didn't belong to Spain no more. It was part of the United States of America now. But out in the swamps, nobody knowed a blamed thing about it. Josiah stood knee-deep in the water one morning, watching the light break through the trees in thin gold threads. To him, everything looked the same. The water was the same, the skeeters bit the same, and the wind still carried the smell of silt and still water. But the elders had felt the change comin'. One of them had said the night before, "When white men change the masters of the land changes the men too."